But it's nice to see our youth develop and grow and be contributors in our community or wherever they move to. So I just thought I'd share that as all my trustees are back and ready, hot to trot and ready to go.
Ready, man.
The clerk is back from her nice vacation.
Back.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. So I'd like to call this meeting to order for Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. Christie, if you would call the order, please.
7:08. Trustee Porter.
Here.
Trustee Kemper.
Trustee
Kemper
Kemper
is
has
no longer
moved on.
Oh,
It was a great vacation.
Okay, Trustee Kunkel.
here,
Trustee Bancole.
here.
Trustee Priegi.
here,
Trustee Husani.
here.
And Trustee Gutierrez.
Here.
Excellent.
That's okay. You missed me calling our state senator by the wrong name. Yeah, that's okay. We're in a groove.
I did written here.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
We did.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Trustee Kunkel.
Yes.
Trustee Bancole. To remove?
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
So I'd like to remove, 7A7 off the agenda.
To be tabled.
To be tabled for future discussion.
Do I, okay. You asking to have a table?
Yes.
To have
I
it, to
think
have it be
that's
removed
smart.
from this agenda.
Yeah, it's not ready for this agenda. Okay, motion to,
Second, does it need to be second?
we have, yeah,
Okay.
We're good.
okay.
Now we will take roll. All right. Trustee Kunkel.
Yes.
Trustee Bancole.
Yes.
Trustee Priegi.
Yes.
Trustee Husani.
Yes.
Trustee Gutierrez.
Yes.
And Trustee Porter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, presentations. Mr. Jim Hedman is with us. Is he here this evening? I will read the proclamation. Jim Hedman, whereas Jim Hedman was hired in May 2006 in the Water Division as a maintenance worker, and whereas Jim Hedman became an equipment operator in the Water Division in July 2011, and whereas Jim Hedman had become an equipment operator in the Sewer Division in March 2020, and whereas Jim Hedman was lead operator for Vector and televising equipment, and has jetted and televised over 284 miles of sewer since 2020. And whereas Jim Hedman exhibited comprehensive knowledge of the village water distribution and sewer collection systems. And whereas we can't afford to have this guy retire. Whereas Jim Hedman was a primary trainer for new employees on complicated mechanical equipment and on safe and efficient repair of water mains. And whereas the Village of Hanover Park would like to recognize Jim Hedman, who is retiring on August 31st after 17 years of service with the village. Now therefore, I, Rodney S. Craig, President of the Village of Hanover Park, do hereby thank Jim Hedman for his commitment to the Village of Hanover Park and urge all to congratulate him for his many years of dedication to the people of Hanover Park. And is he still working, or is he already gone?
He's still here, sir.
Okay, I'll have to personally take this to him. Now this one, I know. Santos Diaz. Would you join me?
Sure.
Well done, my friend. How many nights have you stood here? Very many. Kept us out of trouble. to hear what I have to say. Can you imagine? Whereas Santos Diaz started with the police department as a police officer on July 12, 1999, after initially working in code enforcement unit, and whereas Santos Diaz was assigned to the Special Operations Group in 2001 and 2003, where he focused on gang and narcotic investigations. Don't we know? Whereas Santos Diaz was assigned to the Investigations Division as a detective from 2004 through 2006, investigating crimes against persons and property, including several high-profile cases. And whereas Santos Diaz is a Cook County Merit Award winner. A Merit Award winner.
Yes, sir.
Santos, you kept that a secret. The mayor knows everything except Santos. Whereas Santos Diaz specializes, including field training officer, member of the crisis resolution SWAT team, and truck enforcement officer. You didn't pick on my truck.
No,
I appreciate that. And whereas the village of Hanover Park would like to recognize Santos Diaz, who is retiring on August 12th with 24 years of service with the village. And those years were admirable. You did what it took. And I was pleased to be a part of those years with you and saw the work that you have done. And maybe haven't done, I don't know. But now, therefore, I, Rodney S. Gregg, President of the Village of Hanover Park, do hereby thank Santos Diaz for his commitment to the Village of Hanover Park, for his commitment to the people of Hanover Park. Thank you. And urge all to congratulate him for many years of dedication to the people of Hanover Park. You don't know how I appreciated your work over the years. Did a fine job. Here you go, my friend. You have family here you want a photo with? Let's have family come up. We're getting in the photo. Don't look funny. There you go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Very good. And additionally, my board would like to say thank you.
thank you
If
very
you
much.
will.
For memory.
Oh, for memory. Oh, yes. I better put that next to my heart.
Get out of free dinner.
My man. Thank you, Mr. Grubb. Oh, okay.
27?
Thank you. Thank you. Love it. Okay.
I guess after those words, I better make that a retirement party, huh, Santos? Okay. All right. Presentation, audited annual financial report for the Village of Hanover Park and Hanover Square LLC. What do we got? Presentation?
Go ahead.
It's better if you're here,
Here?
face the board.
Sure.
If you
Turn.
speak to the, yeah,
Turn this
you're
way.
presenting to the board.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Laura Reith. I'm a director at Sickage on the engagement. And on behalf of Sickage, I just wanted to thank you guys for inviting me here to present the financial statements for Hanover Square for the year end 12/31/22. So this will include an overview of our responsibility as your auditor, as well as the process, and I'll make some comments on your overall financial statements and your board report that you've received. So our responsibility as your auditor is to express an opinion about whether your financial statements are materially correct in accordance with GAAP. So our audit provides reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, that our procedures performed and the evidence obtained is our basis for providing an opinion about the amounts and disclosures that are included in your financial statements. So our audit process is broken into a few different parts, with the first being preliminary planning. During that stage, we obtain an understanding about the entity, including the internal controls. We also identify and assess risks about the entity, as well as then we design our audit procedures. Then we move on to final field work, where we perform our procedures, and lastly, the reporting, where we prepare and issue the financial statements as well as the board report. So during this process, we're required to communicate certain matters to you during that time, with the planning and timing of the engagement, significant risks, and also audit findings. So on page 3 and 4 of your financial statements, you will see the independent auditor's report. And that is presented on Sickage letterhead as we're giving the opinion based on your financial statements. I'm pleased to present that you received an unqualified opinion, which is the highest level of opinion that you can receive. So what does this mean? This means that your financial statements are in accordance with GAAP and free from material misstatement. So moving on to page 5 is the balance sheet. So this includes the assets and liabilities of the entity, with your largest asset being your property that is leased to your tenants, with your overall total assets being roughly $8.4 million. So this is your resources that are available or can be available to meet the obligations of the entity, with the largest obligation being your notes payable of roughly $3.8 million. That has a maturity date coming up of August 2024, with a balloon payment of roughly $3.6 million. Moving on to page 6, this is the statement of income. This reports the revenue and expenses for the year. So did you generate enough revenues to cover your expenses throughout the year? And for revenues, you had $1.3 million. This is basically the tenants' fixed monthly payments, as well as your common area maintenance charges. So during 2024, you had 3 tenants that represented roughly 50% of that total revenue. During 2022, you also had some that vacated the property, as well as some new tenants in that property, one leaving at the end of 2022, and then one vacated in the middle. You also had a few tenants that had expirations during the year that went to a month-to-month lease as well. The expenses totaled $1.1 million, which is consistent with last year, with the largest being the real estate taxes. The overall amortization, depreciation, and interest accounted for roughly $383,000. So moving on to page 8. 8 is the statement of cash flows. This shows the cash inflows and outflows for the year. So the net cash from your daily operations brought in roughly $382,000, and then your repayment of the note payable in the amount of $167,000. So you had an overall increase of bringing cash into the entity of roughly $216,000, with ending cash balance of $1.5 million. Moving on, the following pages are the notes to the financial statements. The comments that I would like to make in regards to the notes is on page 11 regarding the notes payable. That includes your estimated future maturity on the notes, with 2023 of a payment of $167,000, and then as noted in 2024, you'll have that balloon payment of $3.6 million. I'm happy to report that the entity was in compliance with all of the loan covenant requirements related to the agreements in this year. Moving to page 12, this is where it shows the footnote number 4 is your leasing operations, and so this shows the leases in place so that will generate your future cash flow for the entity. So you have future annual minimum lease income by year. So based on the signed leases for the upcoming 2023 year, you'll have $918,000 available to cover those expenses, with roughly 5 tenants expiring in 2023 for renegotiation and increase in lease income there. So that's the comments that I wanted to make on the financial statements, and then moving over to the board report. The board report includes our communication at the conclusion of the engagement, as well as if we have any audit adjustments, and then also a summary of uncorrected misstatements, and then lastly, the management letter. So on pages 2 through 4, that includes that our required communication at the conclusion of the audit engagement. I'm proud to report that we didn't identify or recommend any adjusting journal entries for Hanover Square during this audit period. We did have one summary of incorrected misstatement that is included on page 5. That is actually a carryover effect from our prior year audit engagement. So there was an item identified in a previous year that was not capitalized, and so it will appear on this report until it falls off when the depreciation annually for that. So as part of any summary of uncorrected misstatements, we have management review these both quantitatively and qualitatively. And so they look at them individually and in the aggregate to determine if your financial statements are materially misstated. And lastly, that is included in this report is your management letter. And your management letter is an opportunity for us to report any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we identify when we look at your internal controls as part of the planning process, or that we identify throughout the audit engagement. Our consideration of internal controls is of a limited purpose. So we don't test the operating effectiveness of your controls. So there could be a material misstatement or a control deficiency that is not identified. But I am happy to report that we did not identify any material weaknesses in internal control this year during the audit engagement. And that concludes the comments that I'd like to make on the financial statements and the board report. Is there any questions?
Any questions of the board? Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
We
Thank you for
appreciate-
having us.
You appreciate your report. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
And Remy's smiling, so we must be in good shape. Okey doke. Aye.
Hello. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Courtney Moore. I am one of the audit principals at Lauterbach and Amen, and I'm here to present the December 31st, 2022 audited financial statements for the Village of Hanover Park. Before I get started, I did want to say a huge thank you to Remy, Linda, and everybody in the finance department for all their help and hard work in getting everything pulled together. It does take a lot of extra work outside of the scope of their regular job duties to not only prepare for the audit, but to also provide everything we need and get the audit report to be what you see today. So thank you, ladies, very much. The Village is a part of the Government Finance Officer Association Certificate of Achievement Program. This is a very prestigious award where the Village is required to submit their audit report with some additional pieces to it that aren't necessarily required for the state submission. And I am happy to present that the Village of Hanover Park received this award for the 34th year in a row in 2021. So congratulations on receiving it once again. And we have already applied for this award for 2022, and I have no doubt that you will receive it once again. The purpose of an audit is for us to perform various tests and procedures on your financial statements to ultimately form an opinion. We did give the Village an unmodified opinion. It is also known as a clean opinion. It is the highest opinion that we can give. It states that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, and we can rely on the internal control environment of the Village. Additionally, in our SAS 114 letter, which is our communication to those charged with governance, we report that we did not have any difficulties or disagreements with management throughout the process. It was a very clean audit this year. So the audit report is very big. There are about 180 pages in here, and the biggest piece that I do kind of want to touch on is the management's discussion and analysis. If there's nothing else that you read in this report, I highly recommend reading the MD&A. It is financial information in non-financial terms with charts and graphs right at the front, so really easy to kind of take a look and digest the financial statements. And with that, I just wanted to touch on a few key highlights from the year. Overall, your net position increased by about $14 million, resulting in ending net position of about $131 million. Government-wide revenues were about $77 million, and expenses were about $62 million, which resulted in this increase. Combined governmental funds had an ending fund balance of about $62 million, which was an $8 million increase from last year. And lastly, unrestricted fund balance in your general fund, which is your main operating fund of the village, was about $37 million this year. So that can meet the future needs of the village moving forward. The last piece of required information that we have furnished from the audit is something called the management letter. It's our recommendations of any policies or procedures that we would recommend the village kind of look into. The only thing that we have on the management letter this year are new GASB pronouncements. So GASB is essentially the governing board for your financial statements. And from time to time, they come out with new pronouncements of ways that we should be showing things on the financial statements to make them clear and understandable for the readers. So there are 2 new GASB pronouncements coming out in December, and we will work with the village to get those implemented if necessary. But further, we do not have any additional management letter comments. So with all that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have on the audit, management letter, financials.
Any questions of the board? Any questions of the board? Hearing none, thank you for that glowing report.
Absolutely.
We're blessed with some marvelous staff, are we not?
Absolutely. We really enjoy our relationship, and we look forward to working with you in the future again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Town hall session. Okay. Roxanne Parkway, Stefan Feifel?
Good evening. Excuse me.
Good evening.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you folks tonight. In this regards the rocks in the parkway. I've lived in Hanover Park for 36 years in my home, and the rocks have been there since I moved in, and I know for sure they were there 4 years before, so they've been there for 40 years. I've heard comments said that they've been a hindrance sometimes to the snow plows and to the fire trucks. Well, as far as snow plows go, the question would be, if the snow plow hit it, did they slide into it, or were they maybe not paying total attention and maybe even tired going around the area and struck the thing, and maybe were more plowing the parkway than they were the street? The other issue was that there was comments made the plows were damaged. Well, also could it be that they may have been scraping the curb or ran into a curb and not necessarily the boulders themselves? Also, I've heard that the comment was made that the fire trucks slid into them. Well, in normal nature of things, accidents do happen. The question could be, has a fire truck ever struck a vehicle? If a fire truck struck a vehicle, are we going to make a rule saying that vehicles cannot be on the streets? Doesn't make sense. Same thing with the boulders. The boulders are there, and I can understand, for an example, one mention was that the boulder was on the corner. Well, the boulder was probably placed there for a simple reason that that corner kept getting run over by cars, and people were taking shortcuts, and somebody decided that if a boulder was placed there, maybe people would pay attention. The drivers need to pay attention. Accidents do happen. Because an accident happens with a boulder, all of a sudden there's been an issue that all those boulders need to be removed. Well, if there's an accident or a fire truck or a plow strikes a vehicle, does that mean a vehicle can't be on the road? Accidents happen. And because if an accident happens with a boulder, why is there a conclusion that those boulders have to be removed? Myself just received another letter 5 days ago saying that I was in violation and that it was a little bit lightly written, modified, not to be as, a fist coming at me, as far as you need to address taking the boulders away. If anybody here has ever received a notice from the village of a code violation saying you've got 10 days or you're going to be fined, what's the likelihood of you trying to comply? Most people who have had the rocks are going to think, is it worth getting fined maybe hundreds or thousands of dollars just for a rock? So they're going to kind of kowtow to what the village is demanding and just do it. I was at my barber shop and I talked to one of my barbers, and they also heard another homeowner had the same issue. And they were kind of petrified of the fact that the village can be so demanding about people doing certain things and giving a short period to one thing, a short period. I understand that there has been a grace given on this particular subject, and I'm glad it has been. But think about all the issues that come up with normal accidents, normal strikes. We don't go and eliminate something because something happens. It's hard to imagine that after 40 years, and there's only been maybe a few problems with the boulders, why all of a sudden do they have to be removed? There's other major issues that have happened with vehicles and accidents and damage. As far as the liability goes, in the letters that I noticed that were, or the agenda that was initially issued, one issue said that it was a homeowner's liability. The other issue was that it was the village's liability. Well, for an example, I'm a blind guy basically. If I walk down my parkway, what can I run into? I can run into a fire hydrant, I can run into a tree, I can run into a sign. For a fact, I have run into one of the signs right in front of my house. The fire hydrant sign just came by and grazed it. My stick didn't cap it in time. Does that mean I'm going to cause a lawsuit or cause a problem? It's there for a purpose. Same thing, those signs are there for a purpose. Well, the rocks are there for a purpose. The one rock that's on my one side of my property was prevented an accident and a car going into a home, and it made it worthwhile for that rock being there. I hope you, as trustees, put on the garb of a judge and think fairly about what should happen here. Please consider all the things. It's also called an obstruction. Well, according to obstructions, it's something that prevents passage. Those rocks don't prevent passage. At least my rocks and a number of other people's do. I don't know for other issues. But I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for hearing me, and I hope that you consider this very carefully. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stefan. You were loud and clear.
Okay.
Very good.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Well, a point of clarification.
Point
You
of
meant-
clarification.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned that you just received a second notice on the same matter?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you'd like, I've got copies here if you want to see it. It's basically like the first notice that I had showed you when I was here a month or so ago, and it's basically saying the same thing.
Thank you, Stefan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Cindy Henrich, also Cinnabon Drive. Cindy, hi.
Thanks for letting me talk to you guys about at this meeting. My comments are going to be a little bit different than I had prepared after listening to the workshop of the boulders and what were going on. So hopefully I can keep it in a flow that makes some sense. But one of the things I would really like to address is inaccurate and confusing information that has come out of the board over the last couple of meetings that I've attended. And what I mean by that is regarding the boulders. When Trustee Porter had asked at the last meeting that if they were being removed voluntarily, the answer was they had been requesting them to be moved. Well, I went around and I talked to some of my neighbors. One of my neighbor on Rooney Court said that they had the rock taken away after receiving the note and said they didn't want any trouble. My next door neighbor brought the rocks up to his house to avoid receiving a fine. His next door neighbor also removed his rock specifically because of receiving a code violation notice and to avoid a fine. My neighbor at the corner of Stairway and Cinema only moved the rock to his property because of the code violation notice. I asked him Tuesday night if he would have moved it out without the warning of the fines, and he replied he wouldn't. I have a neighbor on Niven, and I asked him the same thing. And per quote, here's how he responded. We did not initiate a request to the village to have a rock removed. We contacted the village only after receiving a code violation notice from the village. Linda, who is his wife, told me that she called Public Works Supervisor to ask if our rock could be grandfathered since it's been here, the property, for so many years, but was told no. Evidently, the village considered it a safety hazard. After that, we requested the Public Works remove it because we did not wish to pay for the rock's removal. I only removed my rock because of the code violation and the threat I felt from it. Let's see. And the other inaccuracies, kind of like what Stefan has mentioned. You know, we heard about the boulders were a problem because snowplows getting damaged. We heard about it, that it was a problem for the traffic to get past it. Now tonight we hear it's a legal issue because if anyone gets hurt, the village has the insurance, not the homeowners. What I would like, Stefan showed me his note, his ordinance as well, the second one that he got. Would it be possible to modify an ordinance so it's clearly understandable to all and communicate it before there's a problem that takes a more drastic approach? The question I also have, one of the things could be to modify that would say, you know, a homeowner cannot place anything in the parkway without the approval of Public Works. When I look at the notice, and I looked at my other one, what it says here is, other than the ordinance that I don't understand, but it also says rocks on the parkway near the driveway. When we talk about rocks on the parkway, are we talking about any rocks, or are we talking just about boulders? If it includes any rocks, then it should be rocks no matter how small or how beautiful. And a rock is a rock. So if you could be more specific about that, I think that would be very helpful. I noticed too, I had brought it up at the first meeting, that there's rocks in the center median on Arlington Road and County Farm Road on both ends. If this is rocks are the problem, why do rocks get to stay there? And you might say they're not boulders, they're not big rocks. But with small rocks, kids can pick them up, toss them at vehicles. They can think it's funny and put some of the rocks in the road, and someone comes home at night, turns the corner, not expecting a rock in the road, and there's damage, there's a problem. There's also a neighbor that has on his parkway, huge fenced, kind of like a fenced in flower bed. But it's with stones, probably decorative stones. My question is that unallowed? Because, again, rocks are in the parkway. Okay, and okay.
We're at your 5 minutes, so
Okay.
don't mind. Thank you very much for coming
Cindy?
tonight.
A question. Can I ask a question? You mentioned that there are boulders in a median?
Not boulders, but rocks.
Okay.
Thank you.
What median is that?
On Arlington Drive at County Farm Road.
Arlington and County Farm?
Yes.
And is that the, did you mention two, or was it just that one?
It's on both sides of the
Okay.
median.
Okay.
I can show you later with pictures.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Hank?
Hello, Judge, hello, Mayor.
Hello, Hank. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I choose to live, I don't choose to die no more. And I don't worry what I already did. Police retirement. I think that, if a guy knows or a woman knows that he takes a risk and he gets killed or hurt, his house is paid for completely off, or her house is paid, her spouse gets the house paid for completely off, no taxes for the next, until she dies. And his kids get a free college or vocational school, or money to start a business, or money just to spend and have a good time, because, you can't take away the dance that you did in life. They'll take more risk, and they won't be thinking about the family. They'll be thinking what's going on in the situation that they're in. And if they get hurt too, they can't work no more. I understand they get a pension. I mean, the wife gets all the money, but don't tell me 10% of this, $2 over here, -3 over here. Where the hell they get these numbers? When somebody starts talking to me, my +2, -1, they're trying to hurt me somehow. Okay, the trains. If we tell them that they got chemical hazardous material equipment going through, they won't be able to come through Chicago. But the problem is, we need the business. It creates a lot of business. But if the rails, I don't know how many years they've been around, but maybe they needed to put a new rail all the way from Canada all the way to Mexico, put a new rail system in. I tore tracks down. They don't have to worry about the machinery. The machinery ain't going to leave the track, ain't going to leave the tracks. If they tell the guy who's the CEO that he's going to get fined if 20,000 trains go through when only 10 were going a day, he won't be laughing at me. What else? Like say, the hazardous material. And you don't just want to make money. You want to do something where you do, where you did your life. If they give me $100,000 a year to work for the train company, I'm going to stay alive for 20 years. And what am I going to do with all that money, Judge? Mayor?
You can buy a couple boulders. How's that?
Sounds like a good idea. I want to live. I don't want to die. And parades. They got these things about rifles and all this stuff. What we should do is put a Humvee at the beginning, a Humvee in the middle, a Humvee in the front, and with 50 caliber machine guns, 50 cops around the parade, 4 snipers. I'm divided among the public. We don't want. Some people want to play games, but we're not playing games. Life is not a game. War is not a game. Teams. What are we talking about? Teams? Forget teams. In the Second War they help each other. That's how they all managed to live, and they went into the unknown like men. They didn't know what the hell they're going. Every time they hit an island, 7,000 Marines die. What else? Life is not sacred in this country. I don't know how to fix the problem. I can tell you one thing. I tell her, make sure that he puts a ring on, and if he says he's not going to marry you, take the ring. Don't give him the ring back. Thank God the evil trucking company I was working for, they put them out of business. They put themselves out of business. They didn't put themselves out of business. They're probably doing a lot of money, more than ever before, but they want to sell all the parts and make more money instead of 5 or 10 years. They want to make it right now. And I don't have much time, so I got rocks. The rocks, I moved them, and they should have done it the first time the right way. They should have put the guardrail all the way down. But the thing about it is that, if you go down the highway and you see at the beginning with the black and white, there wasn't an accident. Somebody tried to kill themselves. Or if they're going around the corner, it could have been an accident. And what else can I tell you? I hope that really what I want to do is I want to put one of those things, the 3 highways, 3 lanes over here, 3 lanes over here, and the cement thing, and if they smash on it, they'll probably deflect it out of it. Have a good day, Mayor.
Thank you.
I got to go do some laundry, so I like to stick around, but I got to do laundry.
I'll go do your laundry. Okay,
Hey, wait a second, Mayor.
thank you, Hank.
And remember, if you've been in the service and you got honorable discharge, you got the privilege not to put your arm in your chest, you got the privilege saluting the flag while you, before
Hear
you
you
say
loud
the
and
Pledge
clear.
of Allegiance.
Thank you, Hank.
Thank you.
One of these days, I will do as he asks. Next on my town hall, Anuja, you're signed in. If you'd like to wait till the agenda item, you want to do it now?
Yeah.
You want to speak and then come back at the, no, did-
Oh.
no, it's not on
It's
consent.
not on consent.
Not on
Would you
consent.
prefer?
It's not on consent, so you can speak at the agenda item.
Oh, okay, we can wait then.
Whatever you prefer.
Wait for the,
It's
yeah.
listed on the consent.
I don't want to
agenda.
limit you to 5 minutes.
It was, okay, thank you. Yeah, we can wait.
Very
It's not
good.
on the consent agenda, it's not.
You are not on consent.
She told me.
Oh, no. Okay, very good. Village President's report. I don't know, it's been so busy, I don't know where to start. This week, we, the Village of Hanover Park received a check for $600,000, and from Raja Krishnamurthy, we had 2 congressmen show, we had many representatives show, nice turnout for the Village of Hanover Park to help serve our community, which keeps us from bonding money for these things and having to raise taxes to cover those bonds. So I'm very appreciative. This board is very appreciative, and I could talk about 40,000 other things, but I'm going to live it at that. It was nice. It was a little warm, but it was nice to see those board members come out that morning, and thank you to the board members that could make it. I know others have to work, and that's very important also. So I'd like to move by omnibus vote items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do a
Second.
motion
Second.
and a second.
And those items are 7A1 through 7A6 and 7A8.
Okey doke, 7A7 was tabled. And we'll move on to 7A9.
No, you
Can I-
have 7A1 through 7A6 and 7A8 are on the consent agenda, and you have to take a vote.
Yes,
Okay.
next step.
Trustee Bancole?
Yes.
Trustee Krigi?
Yes.
Trustee Husani?
Yes.
Trustee Gutierrez? Yes. Trustee Porter?
Yes.
And Trustee Kunkel?
Yes.
Thank you.
7A9, move to pass a resolution concerning Veranda, Hanover Park Unit 2, and finding Amen Living LLC has failed to complete or carry out the work, and authorizing call of a letter of credit. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Now discussion.
So, I would say discussion, Anuja, if you've got the floor with your support team.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening.
Good evening.
I really want to take this opportunity to explain to the board what has been going on at Veranda. And in short, the summary is that Veranda has struggled a lot during and after the pandemic, mostly because it is senior housing. A lot of housing did well during the pandemic because interest rates were zero and the government was giving all sorts of money to people, but senior housing was not one of them. Seniors were a high-risk group for the entirety of the pandemic, and they were not wanting to move and buy a new house, and because of that, there was very low demand, during the pandemic. Even after the pandemic, the recovery in senior housing has been really slow compared to most of the housing. And then this was compounded more by rise in construction costs during the pandemic, which for a new development, that was a big struggle. Construction costs went up almost 60-70%, and we just had to keep going through that. So a lot of the problems occurred because it was senior housing, so much so that institutions that have been around for decades, 5 decades, 6 decades, like the Friendship Village of Schaumburg recently filed for bankruptcy last month for low demand. Again, some housing did well during the pandemic, but senior housing was just flat. I suffered the same problems. A lot of our housing was pre-sold before the pandemic, and it was sold at pre-pandemic, sales pricing. When construction costs became 60-70% higher, I was kind of forced to sell the homes at the pre-pandemic, sales price, because that is what the contracts had said. I was able to terminate some of the contracts, but some of those other people had sold their homes and moved to the area and now wanted their new home. So I was kind of like forced to build the homes at an increased cost, sell them at a lower cost, and that put me behind by quite a bit, almost $2 million of all extra costs. And then since last year, it's just been flat because of the interest rates going so high. So I've not had any sales for almost a year now, and I've had to resort to renting the units instead of selling them. And when you build a for sale product and you're forced to kind of rent it just to keep it occupied, you don't get the same big cash flow that you need to continue the project, and that kind of like put me in a bit of a bind. But we've completed almost 70%, 75% of the phase unit 2, which is under question right now, and we have just 2 last remaining buildings. The units in the 2 previously completed buildings, which were completed in December of 2022, I was only able to sell 1 of the 10 units and rent 4 others, and 5 of those 10 units are still vacant. So if I have 50% vacant units, it would be really foolish to build 10 more units, and that's why we didn't get around to completing those last 2 buildings. A lot of the site work which is being referenced in the LOC is related to those 2 remaining buildings. They're vacant pads right now, and the majority of the site work, such as the sidewalks, and this is internal sidewalks around those 2 buildings, the final surfacing of the roadway, the fencing, and a few other items are related to those 2 vacant buildings. There is no sensible developer who makes a sidewalk around 2 vacant pads. When you're going to go back and construct those buildings, those sidewalks have to be ripped out and redone. The same for the roadway final coating. Most developers will leave the final coating off till when construction is complete, so it's not beaten up during construction. I kind of tried to explain these limitations when I got a call from the village manager. Prior to that, I'd been trying to extend this letter of credit because I know I've not been able to get to that work because I've not built those buildings, because the demand from senior housing is low, construction costs are still very high, and all I was doing was trying to get an extension on that letter of credit. I wasn't trying to get a release. I wasn't trying to run away from my responsibilities. I was just trying to get the letter of credit extended. Another point I'd like to discuss is the amount of work that's left in this particular letter of credit is about 5 to 7% of the total work that we were initially responsible to do, and we've completed that work successfully. The value of the remaining work per our engineer's estimate is $50,000, whereas that same value per the village engineer's estimate is $716,000. So there's a huge discrepancy between $50,000 and $700,000 plus, which needs to be resolved. But the letter of credit that the village is holding, which is $561,000, is 10 times the cost of the work per our engineer, which is $50,000. So I'd really like to make a request to the village board to consider the economic situation for senior housing. Really, it couldn't be more exemplified than the bankruptcy of the Friendship Village of Schaumburg. That institution was a gold standard benchmark community for retirement in the Midwest, and if those people are failing because of low demand and high costs, then I'm just like one individual standing behind every struggle. And I'd like to say that I've managed to stay afloat and come through every struggle because I've been conservative and I've tried to, do the sensible thing. To be pushed into like doing some work around a vacant pad is not a sensible thing for me to do. Lastly, I'd like to bring to the board's attention that, and this is no offense to anybody, but just how I feel I've been treated. I feel like standard process, due process was not followed in this case. I'd been trying to reach the village manager for almost 2 months before to extend that letter of credit. I didn't get any response for a month. I then get a call on a late Friday evening that the village board has talked internally and we'd like to get the work done and we don't want to give the extension. And then whilst I was trying to get my attorney and my engineer's thoughts and a formal response together, 1 week later, I get a default notice. It just feels very humiliating for someone who's been on the ground, who's stood behind every struggle, who's paid every bill that's come her way, to just be treated that way. It just feels like a slap on my face. And I don't know if business owners should be treated that way in a village where they've invested heavily and brought good value so far. I also have our attorney and our engineer here, if the board would be willing to listen to the comments they have to say.
Well, I think we will be patient and listen to comments. I have before me the letter from the attorney I think was received today. The one paragraph that states that given all this, our first goal is for the village to pause its drawing on the letter of credit. Our second goal is to arrange an in-person meeting between the developer, its engineer, and the village to discuss this project and the incomplete site improvements. It's my understanding that none of this incomplete items creating any life safety hazards to the public. We would like to work out a plan to extend the existing letter of credit and to discuss the timing for completion of these outstanding items. So some of these items, as I saw listed, we believe could be completed by the end of the year. There was definitely a gap between what your engineer believes the costs are and our engineer. I don't know how we process through all this, because once we deliver, what was it, a letter of credit?
Default?
Default. I'm not an attorney, and I don't understand the process of all these things and trying to get things done. And the people who are living there, to live with some of the unfinished work that needs to be done. I don't go out there and walk around and say, oh, this rock needs to be turned over and you need cement here. I don't do that. I have to rely on staff. And so we have this gap. And you've been in our community a long time. You've had your ups and downs. My goodness, the pandemic was one thing, and then the interest rates are out of control now, as far, from my perspective. Hopefully they'll come back into control. But, we've got to find a solution. And, I'm not here to be offensive to you, okay? But we have to figure out how we can be effective and efficient in completing a project that you can be proud of as being yours. Your name's on it. And so we want to help you complete that and how we do that and what the ramifications are in and out. I'm not the expert on that, but I'm here to serve the people of Hanover Park. And so thank you for your comments tonight. If you like your engineer or your attorney to speak, that's fine. If any of my board members would like to say a word or two, would offer that up.
I have,
Or if you want to hear from,
yeah, I also like to hear
Lisa?
from them. I have lots of questions.
okay,
But one of them is, this letter says that that the incomplete items aren't creating any life safety hazards to the public. Thankfully, it's been raining, but I live near there, and when it's dry, that dust was horrible. And the stores on the old Salem Plaza complain continuously about the dust coming into their shops. And it would be so hot, they would open the doors, and that would just bring more dust. So it is creating a bit of a hazard. Thank God, hopefully, we'll keep the rain coming.
I'd just like to respond to that particular item. So you're referring to the stockpile on the 2 vacant pads. 80% of that stockpile was reduced last year. I paid $76,000 to have it trucked to various construction sites that I was able to find that take that kind of clay fill. And the rest was stabilized with hydromulching and a silt fence, which is the standard way to stabilize that kind of clay fill.
Okay. And then my other question is, if something like the Friendship Village is having, and it is a gold standard, it's having a hard time, does Veranda have to stay as senior living, or can it be changed?
You know, I'm really glad you raised that question. For years, I have thought, why did I sign up for senior living in Hanover Park? If Veranda were allowed, when I put something on sale over there, 99% of the calls we get are for non-senior housing. It's people come there, they like the housing, they like what they see, they want to rent it, they want to buy it. And other development like Ram Prashanta's development around the corner has done well. A lot of properties have done well, but senior housing is a limitation. I wish I could rent this or sell this to young people. I would not be standing here. We would not have any of this problem if that were the case. But I signed up to do senior housing. 70% of that townhome part of it is sold as to seniors. And I really hate to sell the next 30% to young people and create an end to what they thought would be a little senior community. So my hope really was, I'm just going to, and really this is not, I'm taking the hard path here. Any other developer would have come to the village and said, senior housing is not working in this town, we need to make this non-senior housing. But I think I'm doing what's right, I'm doing what my vision was, and at least this part, I'd like to just have time till when the market turns around, the interest rates become normal, and seniors want to buy these homes, which is what we had before the pandemic.
there would be a problem because the school district.
And that too.
Yeah, that'd be huge. Okay. Other spots?
Can you explain that?
Yes, when we took on a senior area, there's no stipend to the school district at the front end, and no anticipation that additional children would be coming from the site with planning for additional school space and things that go with that. So that would be a major impact. And it would be District 54 who's accepted, what we presented to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I don't know.
Any board members that have thoughts?
Yes, well, go ahead.
Anujaji, I just want to have a quick question as to when do you think this second part would complete, if you anticipate now?
I was looking for the letter of credit to be extended 2 years. I hope and pray that the recovery is good by then. I need a few of those unsold units to be sold, and then I can complete those last 2 units. It's really my goal to finish them. I do not want to end up in bankruptcy. I do not want to end up in litigation. I wanted to finish the project.
So I see a commitment from you towards seniors, and as you just said, that easily you could have turned around, or somebody else could have turned around and sold this as differently. Do you have any thoughts of selling this property as is? Do you have any thoughts going through, or you have any plans?
What's under consideration now is the townhome phase of it, and the last two buildings, I've built 9 of the 11 buildings. And if we can complete that townhome phase will be complete. I have placed the other parts of the property which had the high-rise or the mid-rise buildings, the assisted living and the condo apartment building up for sale. After taking the big loss that I've taken and dealing with a crisis almost every day for 3 years, I don't have the energy to develop that part of it anymore.
So the front lot?
Yep.
Condo's supposed to go?
Yeah, and the assisted living
So you
facility.
will still have the senior living single families
In the back.
townhomes in the back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not selling the whole front and back, you're just selling front. That's what the intent is?
Correct.
Okay.
Trustee Bancole?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Anuja, I'd like to first start by saying that I'm disappointed to hear that you have felt disrespected and you felt like you've been treated poorly. And I can't speak for others, but that's something just as an elected, that's never something that we want to hear from our business partners, our residents, and so I would just like to personally apologize because we never want to make people feel that way, and so I'm very sorry that has been your experience with our village.
Thank you, Trustee Benko.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions. So you mentioned that there was a discrepancy between $50,000 and $700,000. I was wondering if we could just get a little bit more information about those figures and what exactly the discrepancy. I don't know if that would come from our staff. Or
I have my engineer in for this purpose, so if she's allowed to come up here and give details.
Well, we'd like to hear that, and we also have Jonathan Stell here to offer his position. Thank you. Please take the...
Maureen?
So originally, back in 2019, we put together an original letter of credit just for phase.
I'm sorry, before you start, can you just give us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Maureen Mulligan. I'm with RWG Engineering.
Thank you.
So like I said, back in 2019, we put together an original letter of credit that was agreed upon between us and the village for the amount of work that was just for Unit 2 in Veranda. And so basically, what happens is with that letter of credit, you have an agreed upon number of items and the cost for those items. And then as you move forward, as you complete items, they come off the list and your letter of credit is reduced. So if you go back to that original estimate and you go through the items that were agreed upon and in the original estimate, just for phase 2 for Veranda, I had a remaining amount. I was just out on the site last week, and I had a remaining amount of site work that needed to be done that was roughly $48,633. So I know the village came back, and their amount for, actually just for Veranda Unit 2 was $482,000 roughly. So we're just talking about Unit 2 in this case, and the discrepancy comes between items that the village has added to that letter of credit, and then also increased cost for unit pricing that they adjusted, which accounts for a minimal amount of change. But for example, one of the items that has the most impact is that they have an item on there called mass grading Unit 2. Originally, that was done and completed in Unit 2 at a price of $56,000, and that is where the ground is pretty much all graded to roughly finished grade and is preparation to construct the homes. So in all honesty, that was done and completed a long time ago. So on my list, I have that marked as checked off, and the village increased that to $200,000. So that's the biggest one that's in here, but there's a number of things that are similar to that add up. And that's, I think, how they came to their 482,000, and I'm at 48,000. So that was the biggest one, but there's other ones, like I said, and that's where the discrepancy is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jonathan Stella is here. Did you want to?
Sure, if you'd like me to chime in. So like that $200,000 item there, that largely has to do with the additional deposit of creating that stockpile on site. So like Megan mentioned earlier in the process, the site had been roughly graded out, but then as new buildings were built, those spoils from those buildings were deposited on site, creating more work. And over the last few years, we discussed trying to remove that, and it had been what we've been told is very expensive to haul off all that soil, so that those additional costs were put back into the letter of credit. A few other things, like was mentioned, construction costs have gone up significantly since 2019. So what I did was I went through and updated unit costs to reflect what we have seen in increased costs. So that's mainly what's been in there. There's a few other things, like because the work has been sitting there for several years now, we'd have to go back in and televise the sewers, clean them, make sure that they're all good before we do a final inspection. Generally, when you're doing a development and things get done quickly, the village accepts it, the contractor that put them in would do all those things as part of the project, and you wouldn't have an extra cost for that. That's just part of the scope of work. But since the sewers have been mostly completed for a couple years now, it would be very hard to convince a contractor to come out and do that work without getting paid extra for it.
So,
Could she respond?
I can.
Could you respond
Yeah,
to
okay.
some of the comments?
So, for example, the sanitary sewers are permitted by MWRD, and there was a final inspection done on the sanitary sewers several years ago. And so, once the sewers are approved by MWRD, they go out, they do site inspections, they make sure everything's constructed properly. If there's anything that needs fixing, they note it, and it has to get done before MWRD approves it. So the sanitary sewers were approved, like I said, several years ago with an inspector from MWRD, and after their approval, they go into use. So everyone that's living there now in Phase 2 has been using these sanitary sewers, and there hasn't been any problems. It's a normal procedure. So to ask for them to be cleaned and televised and to put final adjustments in there and add $22,000 for that is unusual.
So just to, and thank you for that. So just to give you, what am I trying to say? Our board, as a board, we've spent a lot of time talking about water and sewers, and it's something that we take very seriously. And it's not to say that we are not, the work that MWRD does isn't sufficient, but it's something that collectively as a board, we have spent like meetings upon meetings upon meetings talking about like water, sewer, the costs associated with it. And so that might be why we are doing an additional check. I'm going to defer to our staff, but it's something that we as a board, I mean, for the last several years, it's something that is literally a cornerstone of who we are. So maybe that additional information wasn't provided to you, and I'm going to actually defer to our staff about that specific cost.
And I would just chime in that MWRD does do an inspection to make sure that they are acceptable before they are put in use, but it is our infrastructure and we have to accept it at the end of the subdivision development project. So we have not accepted the infrastructure yet, and before we do that, we have to do a final inspection, make sure everything is acceptable. And as the longer the time goes by, the more likely that there's some defects that show up. And so that's why there's additional costs built in.
So Jonathan, who ends up owning those sewers? Does MWRD end up owning those sewers, or does the village end up owning those sewers?
The village does.
And then who must maintain those sewers?
The village does.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, when MWRD does their inspection before the sewers go into operation, everyone does have to sign off on them. I, look at them. I usually sign the request, for inspection. The village signs the request for inspection and make sure everything okay. So everyone from my standpoint, from the village and from MWRD, agree that they're in good operating condition before MWRD signs off. So I just wanted to mention that.
No, thank you.
And is there an agreed upon standard as to what the viability and the condition of the sewers are that is set by MWRD that's virtually accepted by other communities and other developers? Is there a universal standard or some agreed upon standard for those sewers?
Yes. And I will say, that even when we did the inspection for phase 1, when the MWRD inspector was there, and we pop open all the lids, we look at everything, we make sure there's as-built that are done, it's pretty technical and make sure everything's in good operating condition. He did say that the underground contractor who did put the sanitary sewers in did a really good job, and it's been a long time since he's seen the construction of a sewer done as well as he did. So, I feel like they were installed and done, really well by the underground contractor.
And in your experience in working with sewers like this, have you ever come across a situation where a municipality has done a subsequent investigation or inspection of the sewer and found to be deficiencies that differ from the initial report or status report given by the MWRD?
No, I haven't. Usually when that final inspection is done, where everyone signs off, you're done, it goes into operation, people use it, and it's, in operation.
Okay, thank you. I have a question on the resolution on the third paragraph. Let me get back to it here. On resolution R23, on the third paragraph, it says that whereas developer's obligation, and maybe the attorney can address this, whereas the developer's obligation to complete the work is guaranteed to the village in part by the standby letter of credit issued by Bussey Bank in 2019, as reduced in amount in 2020 to $561,824.07, which is less than the amount of money necessary to presently complete the work. So can you explain exactly why there is a deficiency, or in this resolution they're reporting a deficiency, and that the 561 is not sufficient to complete the work, in your opinion? Or is it, or do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that assessment?
Good evening, everyone. John Zemanak. I am the attorney for the developer. I'm with the law firm Rath G. Woodward. I practice municipal law primarily. Usually I'm on that side of the table, but I'm happy to be here tonight. We're here to seek a compromise with you. To answer your question, the letter of credit amount that the village can draw on is $561,000 or so. That's what the bank is holding for the benefit of the village. Your engineer has said there are items that are incomplete that should be completed, and to complete them, it's going to cost more than what the amount of the letter of credit is that's been posted. If the village were to draw on the letter of credit, they would take the $561,000 from my client's bank account, and the village would then have to retain contractors to complete that work at whatever the prevailing costs are. There may be a shortfall, you may not be able to complete all the work. That burden would be on the village, as I understand it, to use that money to complete what's left. Our position is, one, we believe your village engineer has grossly overstated what needs to be done for this Unit 2 and the cost of that. Our engineer spoke to that earlier. Number two, if you take $561,000 out of my client's bank account to finish this work now, you're going to put her in a very precarious financial situation, which may result in the failure of this development from her standpoint, which she does not want to see happen. If you've driven through this development, what was built by way of public infrastructure in phase 1 and in phase 2 with the townhouses are first class. It's a beautiful development. I've driven through it myself. The street, the curbs, the sidewalks, the stormwater detention, everything was built very well. The stockpile of dirt is the biggest eyesore on that property right now. 80% of it approximately has been removed somewhat recently, and she's working with her landscape contractor hopefully this month to remove the rest or spread it over the property so you don't have to look at that. I'd say the only other issue is making sure the grass and weeds that are on the undeveloped lot are cut regularly. Otherwise, it looks very attractive, and she's doing the best she can given the economic circumstances. She wants to complete this, and she doesn't want the village to force her hand by taking this money to complete items that, one, we believe are overstated, and two, there is no life safety issue right now with any of these incomplete items that warrants the village to jump up and down and say, we have to get this complete. A sidewalk that no one's going to use if it's built, that's only going to get torn up when she completes those last 2 pads. I don't know that it's realistic for the village to do that work, or cost efficient for the village to do that, and it's certainly not for my client to do that. So we at the very least would like you to take some time to consider this, maybe put it on your next agenda, or 2 weeks or 4 weeks from now before the expiration of the current letter of credit, so we can work with your staff and try and come up with a solution. But ideally, we'd like you to extend that letter of credit and allow this developer time to recover, let the market recover, and we can move forward together on what we think is a great development.
So I just have one additional question as it relates to that. There have been several mentions of the fact that the work to complete those items on that tick list or that checklist, the 4 or 5 items, that they could be completed within a year by, I think both engineers have said maybe it could be done at a cost of about $48,000. I think Meg is the, Meg, right? Maureen, I'm sorry, Maureen, the amount that Maureen has mentioned, and I think that our village engineer has a difference of opinion in terms of what that amount would be to complete those 4 or 5 items on that list. And I'd like to have somebody explain to me where the discrepancy is between that, because if it's feasible for those items to be completed within a 5 or 6 month period of time for $48,000, I think that has a different bearing on our decision moving forward, as opposed, if not, if that's not a reasonable expectation. So can someone address that and maybe give me an understanding?
And before I think the engineers get into it, I would make the comment that my client has invested approximately $15 million into this project.
Absolutely, yeah, we understand.
She has not received a return on this project yet. She's sold very few units. She's rented a few units. There are vacant units. She does not have the money right now to start putting good money after bad until she's able to sell units, which will happen when the market turns around, which hopefully is shortly. The other issue is, even if these items can be completed within a month, which arguably they could be, if she gets a contractor and says, put in the sidewalks, what's the purpose of putting in sidewalks for a pad that no one lives in, for sidewalks that go to a dead end that no one's going to use, and that are only going to get torn up once those 2 pads are constructed with new townhomes? So my client doesn't want to throw good money after bad, and she doesn't want to spend money that she doesn't have right now. And that's really what the rub is. But if you want the engineers.
And I would agree with that assessment that, and that may be very accurate, that doing the sidewalk and doing the road before there's going to be other construction on there may not make a lot of financial sense from Dr. Gupta's, position. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out, what is the, and maybe we do that at another meeting, but what is the solution to what is absolutely necessary to be done? What can we forestall because there's future construction that's going to happen? And where's the happy medium between that? You know, where do we do that? Yeah, where's the compromise?
And I appreciate that spirit of compromise, and I think that's where we should have some discussions. The handicap my client has is that she got this notice of default on July 25th. It's on an agenda tonight. She brought me in on short notice, brought her engineer in to analyze your engineer's numbers, and we're just talking about this for the first time now.
Okay.
Time would certainly help identify, are there any pressing issues that need to be done that are life safety issues? I don't believe there are any, but if they are, we'd like to know, and maybe we can figure something out.
Can I say something outside of the safety issues? And I know you moved the pile.
Trustee Gutierrez.
For those of us that live in the area, it's looking at this. So when you come down one area, it's absolutely gorgeous. I would buy and live there, you know, it's beautiful. And then you come from the other area, and the neighborhood in there talks about it, and the neighbors complain, and they know where you live as a trustee. Like, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're looking at. Well, on my end, it looks nice from my end. And so it's also the quality of life in their neighborhood and their values for their property. But I'd like to come to a compromise because I understand how much you put into this, and it saddens me that we can't move you out of that senior part and say maybe singles or something without children. I would love that to happen. I would love something to happen, but outside of the safety is the quality of their lives, of those that live around there and they have businesses there.
So that's, for example,
Yeah.
the stockpile of dirt.
Yes, and
Go ahead.
I was going to address that earlier, trustee. As I mentioned, that the stockpile has been reduced by 80% as it was since last year. The village inspections had given me up till August 15th to remove the rest of it, to spread it out and have topsoil and dirt. I was in the process of trying to do that. It has been challenging to find labor, decent price labor this year. And really, like, I want to make the statement here that I was able to stay afloat during a very challenging time because I was conservative in how I was able to manage my funds. Nobody has like an endless tree of funds, and unless you're really critical of how you're going to manage them. And so, I relied on our landscaper, who himself had a lot of labor issues. He says that out of his 3 people now, he only has 1 person, and he's fallen behind in his work. I agree with you when it comes to quality of life. I could have done a better job of making sure there was no tall grasses and weeds in much of that land, and going forward, I commit to doing a better job of that. And in terms of the stockpile, I'm in the process of like getting it flattened out, and hopefully by the 15th, we should be completed by that.
I have a,
Anyone else?
I just have a comment.
okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, comment. Trustee Husseini?
If anybody on this board, I'm more closer to this topic than day-to-day life, as I help seniors to stay in their homes instead of going to a facility. Nobody wants to go to a facility. They want to stay in their own homes. So when Anuja ji make this plea to extend it, I agree with her more. I understand the whole history of this. In spite of that, I say a lot of times we just don't care about seniors. When we have titles, everybody will ask for us, and we get jobs done for other people. Once we lose the title, nobody asks about us. And we all are going to get to that position one day. I go to nursing homes very frequently. Nobody should be there. That's how conditions are. I'm hoping that we have more awareness of it, and in the future, we have better end of lives for all of us. And someday I'm going to be in their situation. I know that. It's just, I want to live with dignity, die with dignity. And if I could afford a independent living, I'd rather do that. And I understand when the trends were shared here, I see that very closely, the trends. Because in pandemic, the seniors, like especially we talked about Friendship Village, a lot of seniors moved to their kids' home. They wanted to live somewhere close to their loved ones. And guess what? We're seeing a reverse trend now, where seniors are going back to independent living. Kids had it enough. Now they want to send their parents back to their homes. And that is happening. I don't think I've ever heard so many requests since maybe last 2 months I have heard. And actually made a referral to Dr. Anuja Gupta about a senior that is looking for a place. Even though they live in Chicago, they're considering Hanover Park. So things are about to change, and we have to have some patience. As a board, I want to the whole board, I want to plead to extend this. And as we have given so many extensions in the past, I wasn't witness to that. I was not part of it. And I hear the stories and everything else, but these is the reality. This is what we live in. And we all are going to get there one day. This is the time for us to give that extension and have something, a good facility in Hanover Park that is independent living for seniors, that they could live their life with dignity. And this is my plea to the board. Please consider it, extending it.
Anyone else?
I would just say I echo many of the sentiments that Trustee Hussaini just mentioned. Many times seniors do feel very forgotten, and it's the stage of life where they need the most support. So thank you for touching on that. Apologies, I know that you answered this question before. So what is the estimated time for everything to get done? It's within that 2 years that you're asking for?
When you say everything, we're talking about a part called Unit 2. And I was asking for 2 years of extension for Unit 2. As I'd mentioned earlier, the land in the front I have put up for sale. And I've hired a competent broker who has put the word out. And it's a challenging time. Cook County is a challenging county. Taxes have gotten really crazy. And I don't know how fast that land might move, but from my end, I'm doing what I can to move it along.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I did mean like all the buildings that are left.
Okay.
That's what I.
2 years for completion of the townhome phase. I'm asking for 2 years of extension of the line of credit.
Okay, so by that end of the 2 years, everything would be done except like all the things in Unit 2 and all the additional buildings, except for the land that may or may not, you're currently selling right now. Is that
Correct.
Okay, and so that's what your new agreement would state? That's the
That is
request?
what I would like to make the request for.
Okay, and if it doesn't happen in the 2 years, then what are the repercussions?
You know, what I've learned in the pandemic is you really can't call anything. You just have to go with the economic conditions and, you roll with them. As a developer in a very challenging time, to have $500,000 of my money tied up was not a fun thing. Literally, I had to borrow from wherever I could borrow to make sure that all the bills were paid. But I did it, and my goal is to finish it. As I've expressed earlier, any other developer would have walked away from this project when the pandemic started. Very few people have the wherewithal to, and the patience and the vision to just stick in there regardless of what happens. But changing it to non-senior housing is something that almost any other developer would have come to the village 2 years ago and said, senior housing is not working out, I'd like to change it. I've stuck to that commitment, and if you see like the past history, then if that's any indication, really, it's my goal to finish this.
Thank you. So just a point of clarification. So in this new contract that you have, and maybe I should be directing this to our attorneys, I'm not sure, but in this new contract that you have, you'd be given the 2 years. And you've already mentioned that it's your goal to finish in the 2 years. But in this new contract, if that does not happen, let's say, God forbid, we have another pandemic or something disastrous happens, what is the recourse then? Is it pulling on that line of credit? Is it handing over the project to someone else? Is that something that we haven't talked about yet? I guess that's what I'm just trying to get clarity on.
It's dire if it's not done within 2 years, because at this point, she has carrying costs. She's not making money. Probably at that point, the village would probably have to draw on the letter of credit, and she'd probably file bankruptcy. A receiver might get appointed, who would then be looking to sell off whatever assets she owns. And I don't think that's a win for anybody if it gets to that point.
Trustee Macaulay, I appreciate what you're saying, because I'm going to be very blunt here, as they say. As I look, as a woman, I want you to succeed. I want you to pull this off, okay, and get this done. As a Hanoverian person here, I'm so tired of looking at it, Anuja. I really am, and I want to get it done with, etc. And so when she's saying, what do you have in mind if we say 2 years? I think that's important for us to know. That's important for us to say, okay, because we have done a lot of amendments already, because we've done, I think, 6 changes or something to it. And so at what point do we say, okay, at what point do we say, let's be realistic here? Is it the 2 year or?
Much before those 2 years, I would probably come to the village and say senior housing has no demand. Really, if 1 year from now, none of those units have sold, the market is saying something very loudly that senior housing has no demand in Hanover Park, and we'd be kind of forced to open it up to non-seniors. I understand the implications about school district, but I have not taken any money from the TIF district or anything, and if the house is not occupied, the house is not occupied. I mean, what are you going to do? So before it gets to any sort of dire condition, I would come to the village and say that we'd like to open it up for non-seniors.
Before that letter gets pulled, then you would open it up.
Yeah, and again, if you see what's at stake from my end, there's a limited amount of work. It's related to this vacant lot. What's causing an eyesore, and I agree with you, the stockpile and the tall grass weeds, they should be gone. And I'm working on those to be gone very soon. But in terms of not having senior demand to build more senior housing is getting to a limiting point, and then at some point, as a village, as a board, we'll have to decide that we've given it a fair enough shot, and senior housing is not working, and we have to open it to non-seniors. Okay. And trust me, if I'd chosen that path, no, really, I mean, I want you to believe that, I chose the path, I chose the difficult path, and I'm at this point close to litigation and bankruptcy because I chose that difficult path. And really, I mean, I hope God gives my daughter more judgment than he gave me.
Well, I don't think anybody expects you to be Warren Buffett, and I don't think he can predict financial futures. To base a lot of this, and the hypotheticals can go on, what if, but the reality is that you're in a tough economic position right now with a tough senior market, housing market, with a tough market in terms of supply chain demands and labor costs and all of those things that put you in a hole. It's accelerated by the pandemic and the problems that it caused. It does nobody any good to see this project go belly up. It certainly doesn't benefit the village. And one of the things that I've learned is that as the village, have no appetite to get into the development business. We have already had a taste of kind of getting out of our lane when we got into the real estate business and with Hanover Square, and we became real estate agents and we became property owners, and that has had its own problems. I don't want to repeat that mistake by becoming developers by saying that we're going to call your letter of credit and then the village is going to take on the responsibility of finishing this project. I don't think the board has an appetite for that, and it's not something that I think our residents want us to do. So I'm hoping that based on your letter, sir, that we'll be able to figure out a compromise that will give you the opportunity with every reasonable constraint that we can, to protect the interests of the village, but also to help you see this project come to fruition. I think everybody wins in that situation. I thank you guys for coming out, for you bringing your experts, the engineer and the lawyer, and also for our staff for their input. I feel a lot more educated and informed about this, this whole process after this debate and discussion. So I'm going to, end my comments and turn it back over to the mayor. But I just want to thank you and wish you Godspeed and good luck on trying to complete this project.
Thank you, trustee.
So let me kind of give a little different point of view. And I guess the point of view is, what is the village's interest? And I think it's an important point of view, because we're the village, Hanover Park, and it's the village's interest that ought to be paramount in all of your thinking. So there's been a lot of discussion here about completing the buildings, and the buildings being part of whatever it is you're thinking it is part of. But the buildings are not part of the subdivision improvements. They are not. The subdivision improvements are streets, sewers, some landscaping, roadways, things of that nature, not the buildings. The other thing is, there's been a lot of talk about the completion of the project and how much money it would cost to complete the project. One of the issues that I believe is still unresolved is the condition of the improvements as they exist today. So I believe that it would be necessary to determine that, and I don't believe it has been completely determined by the village, and that has a dollar amount attached to it. That has to do with the idea that streets are built, sewers are built, things are built, roadways are built, the base is put in, but maybe the surface course is not. I really don't even know the condition of what's out there. I mean,
The surface course is on a good, what, 80%
well,
of the roadway?
Just give me a chance to finish what I want to say.
Certainly, I'm sorry.
I've listened to everything that you've had to say.
I agree.
Okay? And so it's important to determine, what is the cost of doing all of this work? And the village engineer has an opinion concerning that cost. They seem to have an opinion concerning that cost. Those two opinions are miles apart. And so I don't think that you can determine that it is $48,000, and you don't have any idea of what it is, if there were to be a new letter of credit, as to the amount of that letter of credit, which would be a paramount issue to be determined. If it's $48,000, like the developer says, and it ends up costing $500,000, and the developer doesn't complete it, well, you just cost the taxpayers $500,000. So you have to be concerned about whose interest you're concerned about. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be concerned about the developer's interest. You should be. But the paramount interest has to be the taxpayers of the village and the village itself.
Could I make a comment, Bernie, on?
I'd like to finish.
Okay.
Thank you. So the issue of the life safety, which has been mentioned by the lawyer for the developer in his letter and his statement, is not part of the improvements of the subdivision. It is not part of the letter of credit. It's not really an issue other than the fact that it can demonstrate that certain things can save lives and other things may not be life-saving. And that really isn't an issue concerning any of these improvements or this letter of credit. Now, some other issues. It would be necessary to determine, if you don't want to pass this resolution this evening, that there be a letter of credit in place of the one that currently exists, if that's your desire. That letter of credit would have to be in place well before this letter of credit expires. This letter of credit expires on August 30th of this year. And if you take no action, you will have no letter of credit at some point in time. You have a developer who has no personal liability on this subdivision, no personal liability. The only security you have is the letter of credit. The only security you have is the letter of credit. If there's going to be a substitute letter of credit, you would have to determine the time period in which the developer would have to complete this project. And you would have to have a cost that you're comfortable with that would actually complete it. And so those are all things that are really important. And I think the developer has to say here tonight that, one, they would be agreeable to a period of time that's reasonable, whatever that is, I don't know, that they would have to provide a letter of credit in an amount that is at least whatever this letter of credit is, plus whatever additional costs might be incurred because of inflation or this, whatever the cost of the CPI or whatever is involved. And I can't speak to it because I don't have that information personally. You have to rely on the engineers for that information. And then you would have to have an agreement as to the term of that letter of credit. Now, if the developer were to say, you know, we will come to terms concerning that, and I don't remember, Anuja, can you tell us how much was the amount of the letter of credit that you did propose to the village? Do you know?
We have not proposed any reduction in the existing amount of the letter of credit, which is currently $561,000, which, again, when you consider there's $200,000 in your engineer's estimate to remove a pile of dirt, which is mostly removed and just needs to be spread, we think the engineer's estimate is excessive, with all due respect, and maybe it's due to...
Well, we have an ordinance that requires that the letters of credit can be reduced along the way.
Yeah, as this one was.
But they cannot be reduced more than 50%. Is that correct?
Yes.
But it's by our ordinance.
And we're not looking to reduce it.
Yeah.
And our ordinance specifies that when the request is made, the village is responsible, the officials of the village, the management of the village, is responsible for determining at that point in time, you know, whether or not there is sufficient funds to complete this project, plus 10%, I believe, is what it says. And so that's a necessary thing. And so I guess the question is, if it's determined by the village that the cost is more than that $581,000, are you going to be agreeable to having the letter of credit in that amount?
Well, we haven't even discussed that because our engineer
So that's
says
$48,000.
it's significantly
Yeah.
less. And maybe that's, if this notice wasn't given to us a month before the expiration of the letter of credit and we had discussed it ahead of time, maybe we could have worked this out.
Yeah, and that may be true. I mean, that may be a true statement. But the issue is that the facts that exist today are truly the facts that exist today, and the facts that exist today is that there's a letter of credit out there that expires on August 30th. Today is August 3rd. Is it the 3rd today? And the time is short to come to an agreement, and what's the realization that there will be an agreement? And unless there is some realization that there will be an agreement, I don't see how the village can just simply say, well, we'll do something and we don't know what we're going to do. That's the issue. So I think that you have to come to some idea. Now, you might be able to put this off for a couple of weeks and have an opportunity to go over this. That's possible, okay? And I'm sure that's what you want to do. But I think there has to be some realization. So you're basically saying that you're definitely agreeable to at least the $581,000. Is that correct? Or whatever that amount is.
Yes, it is 561,000, and for the record, we were not trying to ask for a reduction of the letter of credit, even though the work that left to be performed per our engineer's estimate is much smaller than that. I know what village ordinance is, and I know I signed up for that, and we were willing to just leave the 561,000. And, you know, I want to make a statement about this again. I reached out to the village manager 2 months ago to extend this letter of credit. We were not asking for any release. We were not asking for any waiver. We simply wanted an extension because of these economic conditions. I didn't hear from the village manager for 1 whole month. I followed up with the village manager to find out what the status was, and she said she'll discuss it with the board internally and get back to me. I hear back from her late on one Friday evening, and before I have the time to even have our engineer and attorney put their thoughts together, 1 week later, I have a default. I was the one who reached out to have the letter of credit extended, even if it's not completely clear what the actual costs of the repairs are. If our estimate is 50,000 and the village estimate is 500,000, the truth might be somewhere in between that. 2 years ago, we went to the village engineer and we wanted a further reduction on the 561,000 because we believed that a majority of the work had completed at that time. The value of the remaining work was around 250,000. Since then, I've completed a lot of those works, which included completion of the roadways, the street lights, the curbs, the sidewalks, and really, you know, in all fairness, if the value of the work is not 50,000, it could be 3 times, it could be 150,000, but $561,000 of my funds have been stayed tied up. I've not asked for it to be released. I've not asked for it to be reduced. I've stood behind every challenge that's come my way, and here I'm standing today. So all I was asking was for an extension. 1 month of the 2 months was just ignored, and you know, we wouldn't be here if we were not served a default letter 1 week after we were asked to, that we're not going to extend it.
Yeah, so the other thing too is that it's really, you know, we're sitting here on August 3rd of 2023, I gotta realize what year it is, you know. But when a letter of credit is extended, you know, it's the value of the work whenever the work is done. And if you say 2 years, you're talking about what's the value of the work in 2025. And if you're talking about 1 year, it's what's the value of the work in 2024. But at any rate, I think it needs to be some conclusion as to the amount of any extension of a letter of credit, how long you would be permitted, if they were to permit it, for you to complete the work, and how long that letter of credit, the term, would have to be. In my view, the term of the letter of credit has to be at least 1 year beyond the time that they give you to complete the work. 1 year beyond the time that you are given to complete the work. So those are my comments.
Where do we go from here? I mean, is there an opportunity for your staff and our staff to get together and try to figure this out?
That's what we'd like to do. That's what needs to be done.
And do we need to have a special board meeting to try to get together?
I think I've explained everything that I can explain to you.
I know.
Okay, so, you know, you have to decide yourselves now as to what you want to do.
I'd like to find out what this discrepancy is between 700K and 50K or so.
Well, they've already said that they're going to agree to at least $561,000. So, is that right?
For the amount of the letter of credit.
Right.
We disagree with the engineer's
I
estimate
understand.
of the value.
But I mean, I think you don't want to leave this board with the impression that the letter of credit amount is going to be $48,000.
We never said that.
I'm just saying.
You keep saying that.
Yeah, you've said that, and you've referred to it over and over and over and over.
Okay, so just to clarify, tonight, we need to figure out a figure and, a
No,
deadline.
no, I think tonight, we need to agree that based on this letter and what you recommended in this letter, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut
It's
you
okay,
off.
it's okay.
My apologies.
It's okay.
I apologize for that. It says, given all of this, our first goal is for the village to pause its drawing on the letter of credit. That's the first thing that they're asking, and then we'll present our side. Our second goal is to arrange an in-person meeting between the developer, its engineer, and the village to discuss this project and the incomplete site improvements. That's the second thing. And then it's my understanding that none of these incomplete items are creating, okay, that's neither here nor there, the life safety product. We would like to work out a plan to extend the existing letter of credit as option number one, and then option number two, to discuss the timing for completion of these outstanding items. I think that what we need to do is my recommendation is that we give the staff direction before this letter of credit expires to our attorney's point, because once that letter, we're out of options if we allow the letter of credit to expire. So in the time that remains, you need to get together with our staff and see if you can come up with an agreement that is acceptable to our staff, who will then bring it back to the board. And I am of the opinion that whatever the staff brings back, because of the time constraints, then the board will probably approve whatever the board's final recommendation is. But we want to give you one last chance to see if you can resolve this. That would be my possible, resolution to this, because as our attorney stated, if it expires, then we're out of options and we're left with no recourse to
we have time
to secure any of this.
I'm sorry, can I hear Juliana? What were you gonna say?
So, a couple of things, just so that we can move things through and see if the board decides to provide for this more time. So, the current letter of credit has two dates in it. The current letter of credit had a date of completion by 20 of 21. So, it is 20 of 23. So, as Bernie said, any expectation or date that goes in there has to
So when you say 2025 numbers, that means that's more than 561,000?
Absolutely. Well,
Okay.
if the work comes back as what is being estimated, and I trust that the engineer's numbers are right because we've gone through them, is that that number has been escalated for 2023 numbers, and we all know what construction costs are costing. And had this project been done in 2021, it would have been less expensive than to do it in 2025. And so there's an escalation in construction costs to do that work. We think when we had the discussion with the board, that if the letter of credit was called, we were gonna be able to do it for less because we have a road program going out right there, and we could have put it as part of the road program. If that's not what's going to happen, it's gonna be the cost to have contractors come out and finish. So, my understanding is the options for tonight, Bernie, correct me, is for the board to table this to the next board agenda and to direct for a letter of credit with some parameters in it to be provided on the agenda, along with calling of this letter of credit, and then the board will make a decision at that time, so that after the next board agenda, we have time to either call the letter of credit or to know that that letter of credit is fully there before the expiration of the old one.
I have a question, Anuja. She mentioned that we need 2 dates, when the letter expires and when the work will be done.
The work getting done needs to be the earlier date.
The earlier date. If we stated that the work would be done by 24 and the letter expires by 25, is that feasible?
I wanted the work to be done, I wanted 2 years to have for the work to be done,
So that the letter would expire in 26?
26.
So if we if we table this and the engineer goes out, is it a collaborative review with their engineer and ours?
We'll have the number and we will review it with the developer and go through and explain and have their engineer there and our engineer so we understand where everything's coming. But we will request that the letter of credit reflect our estimate.
See, I would suggest that a collaborative process might be more beneficial so that we're not here in 2 weeks saying, how could your engineer?
He said, she said, right? Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that your engineer won't stand his or her ground and say, I disagree with your engineer, but we at least like to be part of the process because, again, there's a $200,000 number for dirt, which we don't think is accurate, whether under today's prices or prices 10 years from now, because most of it was actually already removed and it just needs to be spread, and she's got a contractor, hopefully in the next few weeks, ready to take care of that.
Can that dirt be spread by the next meeting?
You know, those numbers, we had this conversation, we were here a year ago. The board was very angry, you weren't here, but the board was very angry that the stockpile was there, and we heard from the developer that it was very, very expensive, that there was no place to take the soil, and that it was going to take time and a considerable cost to remove it. I'm not hearing today that when I spoke with the developer last week, she told me that at the beginning of the month, on Monday, the dirt was going to be removed. Now the dirt is still there, and I'm not hearing a definitive date and place that the dirt is going to go. So we have to take into consideration in this letter of credit, the cost that it's gonna take to remove the dirt if the dirt is not removed.
I mentioned earlier that the village inspection department had given a date of August 15th. I have retained a contractor. I have given him a deposit. He had some machine problems, and that's why he wasn't there on that Monday. But give me a chance till August 15th, and the majority of that dirt will be removed.
Are we gonna table this to a collaborative process?
Can I ask that we have these 2 entities meet to discuss this, and that at our next one, we would have to run with this, so we can have that letter of credit, and I understand there's a new bank, so that we can look at that then.
I just
I suggest that
you're gonna have to make a
Either
decision
or.
in 2 weeks.
Right, yes, and either or.
So I just want it to be one way or the other.
Right.
Because the village cannot be
credit
Right.
at all.
Right.
August 17th.
So there's no opportunity or no option or no appetite for maybe having a special board meeting on the 24th? Would that not give enough time?
That would not.
To
No,
correct.
I'll
Okay.
come back.
Okay.
I will
that's my
come
question.
back.
Unless you're not
For the
concerned about
17th.
not collecting the
No, that's why I'm asking the question. I
No,
didn't
I'll
know.
come back
Well,
early
the
for
letter
the
of credit's
17th.
drawable on site. It's really sending a notice and they have to pay. They have no defenses to not paying as long as it's received by the bank before August 31st or 30th.
It's too close.
We'd like
It's,
to have it.
it's
Fair
too
enough.
much money and
Fair
it's
enough.
too close.
Well,
So
maybe
that's
we
where
can
we're-
just have the letter extended 60 days.
The new date.
Can you clarify?
The letter of credit expires on August 30th. Whilst we are figuring all of this out, I also don't want to have a sword hanging over my neck about this August 30th date. So one option could be to extend the letter of credit for 60 days. That allows a little bit more discussion and all the numbers to be resolved.
I don't think that the village.
So can I respond?
Would reasonably object to that. I don't. Why would the village object to that? You can draw the letter on August 30th if she wants to extend it for 60 more days. You could draw it on September something. There's nothing that you lose if she does that I can see.
Well, that was almost a breath of fresh air. You know, I mean, we're talking about time here.
But Trustee Binkle, you have a concern?
Well, I was
I
just
don't
gonna.
think, I don't think it changes anything. I don't.
It very well may not, but it doesn't rush it.
Correct.
But I would like to see that pile of dirt gone by the 17th, if you have that 15th, to put some trust into us. That would really show us that it is moving in the right direction, since it has been postponed.
The clerk has.
It will be. And I take responsibility for that. I mean, I should have, and to Juliana's point, it is very expensive to have dirt taken out. Last year, I frantically approached every construction site that I could think of and still paid $76,000 to take out 80% of that. And now there's 20% remaining and I'll have it addressed. And again, like I said, I have been behind in maintaining the rest of that site with a lot of tall weeds and grass, and I should have been more on top of that.
Are we, I'm hearing an extension of 60 days to get by some time.
You're hearing the developer say that she's willing to ask the bank for an extension of 60 days. You can't rely on whether the bank will or will not give an extension. So I think you're hearing something, but you're interpreting it differently.
I have reached out to the bank and they have expressed openness to extending it for 60 days.
And we will need a letter of credit in hand by the 11th, so it can go on the agenda for the board's review, and it has to be a fully executed letter of credit so that it can be in the packet on the 11th of this month.
Can you do that?
So we can protect
And
ourselves by August
My other
30th.
question is at what price are we going to be having this extended letter of credit that is being suggested here?
My proposal was to simply extend this letter of credit, which expires August 30th to September 30th, and that gives all of us some reasonable time to discuss this big issue. I mean, there is many issues to be discussed.
With the same amount?
But can I also?
October
have
30th.
John
October,
speak to the dates and how letters of credit and calling letters of credit work?
Yes.
In terms of the blackout dates that are allowed?
John, can you step up?
You want me to come up there?
Yes, I want to see your eyeballs.
Put them in the spotlight.
All right, John.
So Juliana was just mentioning from November 15th to April 1st, final inspections cannot be done per code. That's just due to weather conditions. It's blocked out within our code. So the letter of credit should not expire during that time frame, because there would be no way.
What's that time again? What date?
November 15th to April 1st.
So a 60-day extension doesn't touch that.
Well,
So that should.
Sorry, go ahead.
So that should put it at
October.
into October, right?
Yeah.
For a
Right.
60-day extension.
So apologies, and Sorry to throw a wrench in this. So I don't think we're gonna be here as a board that last, at the end of September, because that's a meeting that we've actually previously canceled due to IML. So in the spirit of compromise, can it maybe be 45 days, not 60 days? Because we're not even gonna be here as a board.
It's
for it to be-
it's no disadvantage to the village for it to be 60 days. There's no disadvantage.
There's also the disadvantage of remembering this entire conversation, right? It's fresh in our minds. We want to make decisions, fully informed decisions. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, let's not create extra work. So if we're not going to be here, right, if we already canceled that end of September meeting, let's just do 45 days so that by
Well, maybe we really
September 7th.
need to have that meeting.
September 7th. No, we won't be. we
I'm
won't
sorry.
be here.
With all due respect, we were talking about a 60-day extension from August 30th. That gets us to September 30th to October 30th. So then during your mid-October meeting, or maybe by your first meeting in October, we can discuss this. It would be after the IML
Starting
meeting
at
is
August
canceled.
30th, not from when we issued the letter.
Correct. At the extent, yeah, 60 days from August 30th, sorry.
So it should be remembered that the village board does not have a village board meeting on the 21st of September, and it does not have a village board meeting on October 19th.
We can call a special meeting.
Yeah, let's do that. This is too close. It's too, really, we're trying
I think-
we're trying to work with you in the spirit of compromise, but this is, I think that's very close. I think that maybe we can call a special meeting, but we'll have to figure it out, but.
Budget season.
It's, yeah, I'm uncomfortable with 60 days. I don't know how others feel, but the fact that maybe if we didn't have canceled meetings, but the fact that we have canceled meetings,
Well, we could uncancel a meeting.
right, but they were canceled for
They
a
were
reason,
canceled because we won't have
right?
a
We
quorum.
won't be here.
I think if there's a 60-day extension, you would want to meet no later than your first meeting in October to say, do we have an agreement or not? And if you don't, then you'd have on your agenda to draw on the letter of credit.
Actually, I won't be here the first meeting.
Okay, well then, I mean, very good. We know that.
But I think that
You know,
gives
the
us,
best laid plans.
Like,
yeah.
Well, the extension means that we're gonna work diligently to get caught up, and
I
as
mean,
soon as we have an
no one
agreement, I'll
has
call a
worked,
meeting.
no one has worked diligently yet. No one has worked diligently yet. So, they say that in 3 days, they can go out and do a punch list. Let them go out and do a punch list. Then let them discuss whatever, is that what you said? In 3 days?
It will take 3 days.
Oh, it'll take 3 days, okay.
But it'll be a collaborative
But I
process.
mean, it would have to be done before,
I really want that.
well, I don't know. You tell me.
That's pretty tight. The 60 days
No,
extension
that's the-
buys us time not to rush your staff.
I
and-
have no objection to the 60 days.
Okay.
I have no objection to
But what we're saying is that
Never
the
had any
60 days doesn't work with when we meet. We physically will not be here as a board. So I understand that it works for you, and we get that. But like, if we physically aren't here as a board,
Well, maybe we have a responsibility.
No, I think the answer to the question is try to get this thing resolved within the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, not 60 days from today.
Right.
that might be our
They're
only
just
option.
saying that they'll extend the
Extend it,
letter
it
of
doesn't expire
credit
at the end of
till, for 60 days.
But we still need to
That's
vote
what
on
they're
it.
saying.
But we can get the work done before.
And will the situation from a legal perspective of the fact that the developer is in default continue during that 60 days?
The developer has been in default since 2021.
I don't wanna go down that path.
Which path is it?
But I want to, let's get the 60 days, let's try to get this caught up and then have a meeting.
I'm just saying that because the default allows us to draw that letter of credit.
they've been in default since 2021,
Yes, but this letter.
and that issue.
It's the,
So that status won't change, it'll remain the same while we go through this?
yeah,
Okay.
we're just,
Just one more comment I want to make. I haven't gone anywhere. In every challenge, with every meeting, with every extension, with every issue, with every notice, I've been here. I'm not going anywhere. Completion of this project is a vision of mine. I'm not going to run away in 45 days.
Anuja, we're working really hard to try to solve the problem.
I know.
Because we want to respect you to finish this project.
Thank you, Mayor.
And at 60 days, just kind of gives us a little more flexibility. I'll call a special meeting if we have to, but we got to be diligent. We got to be ahead of us, diligent, to move this along.
And by the way, if it's not, if she doesn't obtain a 60-day extension, I guess it's on your next agenda to call the letter. So you're protected.
So I want a collaborative process. I want people to try to figure this out together and make sense of it.
Well, actually, Rod, you have ordinances that the village has passed. Usually you try and follow the ordinances. If you can have a collaborative process in addition to that, then I think you're okay.
Thank you.
But until you follow your own ordinances and try and get this resolved.
I'm not there to
that way.
kill anybody. I want to have a process that works for everyone.
Sorry to take up all your time this evening, but appreciate all the thoughtful
Thank you.
comments.
We are going to table this,
Until August 17th.
okay? Are we good?
We will call.
I make a motion that we table this.
Second. I'll second.
Till what date?
August.
August 17th.
I thought you said October. Okay,
No.
yes.
Mayor, there's one more request I'd like. I really like a collaborative process. I would like for our engineer to go out and meet the village engineer when he's on the site making this punch list. It really facilitates many things rather than go back and forth in circles forever after that.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second.
I have a motion. Thank you.
Christie, call the roll.
Trustee Prigi?
Yes.
Trustee Husani?
Yes.
Trustee Gutierrez?
Yes.
Trustee Porter?
Yes.
Trustee Kunkel?
Yes.
And Trustee Bancole?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We're taking a 5-minute break.
No, do the same thing back there.
I'm sorry, Brad.
Okay, item. Chrissy, if you would, call the roll, please.
Yes, we're back on break at 9:28. Roll call, trustee Ruby?
Here?
Trustee Lusani?
Here.
Trustee Gutierrez?
Here.
Trustee Porter?
Here.
Trustee Kunkel?
Here.
And Trustee Bancole?
Here.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. 7:10, move to approve warrant 803/2023, the amount of $754,264.48.
So moved. Second?
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none. Christie, call the roll.
Trustee Lusani?
Yes.
Trustee Gutierrez?
Yes.
Trustee Porter?
Yes.
Trustee Kunkel?
Yes.
Trustee Bancole?
Yes.
And Trustee Rudy?
Yes.
Thank you. 7:11, move to approve warrant pay debits 7/15/2023 through 7/28/2023 in the amount of $1,172,886.88.
So moved. Second?
We have a motion and a second. Questions on the warrant? Christie, call the roll.
Trustee Gutierrez?
Yes.
Trustee Porter?
Yes.
Trustee Kunkel?
Yes.
Trustee Bancole?
Yes.
Trustee Rudy?
Yes.
And Trustee Lusani?
Yes.
Thank you. 7:12, move to approve June 2023 fee cards in the amount of $16,724.58.
So moved. Second?
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none. Christie, call the roll.
Trustee Porter?
Yes.
Trustee Kemper? Sorry.
We miss him, don't we?
Yes. Yes. I was at work, I just at work.
James?
Trustee Bancole?
Yes.
Trustee Rudy?
Yes.
Trustee Lusani?
Yes.
And Trustee Gutierrez?
Yes.
Thank you.
Village manager's report, Juliana.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Village clerk's report, Christie.
The car show is this weekend, noon to 3 on Sunday. Come on out, enjoy, tell your friends. We have motorcycle car radio coming out for, to do like a radio show type of thing out there. So we're excited to have them. And then we'll also have the Midwest Car Show as well coming out, so come on visit us.
Oh. I'm glad you can read sign language.
I got it.
Okay. Corporation Council report.
No report, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Porter?
Just, everyone has a copy of the backpack, back-to-school distribution for Hanover Township. Other than that, no report.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Kunkel?
Yes, I just found out recently that Central De-Information will be having a backpack giveaway at the next Movie in the Park. They'll be there in a booth, so hopefully it'll be a good turnout there. That's all I had.
Thank you. Trustee Bancole?
Yes. Again, we had, excuse me, let me start over. Earlier tonight, we had a board workshop on the Boulder matter, and I do hope that the residents that were present, it was informative for them. I hope that it answered some of the questions. We are definitely, I believe, are moving forward in a way in which we are trying to make our residents aware of this new enforcement measure, and we are trying to be more communicative about this as a whole. We did have a couple of residents speak here tonight on this issue. And one resident, she is no longer here, but one resident had questions about the ordinance itself, the modification of the ordinance, clarification on which rocks we were referring to, and so I am of the opinion that I would like to see this ordinance. I think that this is an issue that has come up time and time again. I would definitely like to find a resolution, and so would definitely like to see this ordinance. Maybe it is time for review, maybe it's not sure. Maybe it's time for review, maybe it's not time for review. Nevertheless, would like to see this ordinance. Would like to see what the ordinance says in regards to the boulders and how far they have to be from the curb. Or maybe there is no stipulation, and that's a stipulation that we introduce. Maybe that's the solution to this. Would just like to see this ordinance, and so I don't know if others are in agreement, or this is something that can be placed on the next board agenda. But ultimately, would definitely just like to find a resolution to this matter.
Okay, village manager would like to speak to that.
I can do it after your report or regarding this boulder issue. I don't
Yeah, go
wanna
ahead.
interrupt you, but-
Yeah, go ahead, yeah. Mhm.
So we've had this come up at several board meetings in a row, and at each of them, we've had comments from board members that we believe have led some members of the community who have boulder violations to believe that there may be a change coming down, and so they're not removing their boulders in hopes that there will be a solution that allows them to keep their boulders. And so I think that the board needs to give clear direction as to whether you're going to make a change, because we're going to proceed under our policies and practices, and the next step is that people will receive violations and citations, and I don't want them to get a citation if they are believing that they're keeping their boulder there because in hopes that the board is going to either like grandfather or have it on the next agenda. So right now, our recommendation, as it was in the workshop, is that we proceed to work with the residents to remove the boulders. But I would just ask the board to have that in mind, as these individuals are still here listening to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you talked about the issue about grandfathering in. I think that's already been clarified, that that's not essentially something that it would create a liability for the village. But we've spent a lot of time talking about this ordinance, and we've yet to see it. And so just clarity, we got questions tonight about modifications, about the rocks, about the this, about the that. Ultimately, right, the goal is to come to a resolution. And so let's leave no stone unturned. No pun intended. But truly, let's work, to find a resolution, right? So that's why I'm asking for the ordinance to be presented before the board. We can have an overview of the language. Maybe you agree with the language, maybe we don't agree with the language, but let's continue down this path of due diligence. And so that's what I'm asking the board. I don't know if we're in agreement with that, not in agreement with that,
I
but.
think if you're asking for a review of the ordinance, and we haven't had it.
Well, you have it. The
think that's
police
appropriate,
chief
too.
sent it to everyone.
Let's see it. Anything else?
On the next agenda? On the next board meeting? Is that what we're saying?
Without objection?
Okay, thank you. I have two more things to talk about. Still continuing to attend the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference Legislative Committee meetings. The last meeting spent a lot of time talking about the newly passed state legislation with the uses of drones at large-scale outdoor events. So with a mind towards public safety, and so maybe that's something that we'll start to see more of in the area when we think about parades and things that we're doing outside. You know, we just had a very lengthy conversation about all the events that we're doing. So just keeping public safety at the forefront. And last but not least, I wanted to tip my proverbial hat off to our staff for putting on an excellent event in which we celebrated the federal funds that we were able to secure through the appropriations process for fiscal year 23. And so many thanks to Congressman Krishnamurthy, but also many thanks to our colleagues in the Senate who supported the appropriations process as well. Congressman Krishnamurthy also discussed that we would be in FY24 getting an additional $800,000 for other infrastructure needs, and it should just be noted that our counterparts in the Senate, so Senator Duckworth and Senator Durbin, allowed for Congressman Krishnamurthy to lead on that, and so I'm really happy that he was able to secure those funds for our village. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Yeah, there's still a process with that, but I'm pretty optimistic we'll see that.
Yes, so it is passed through the Senate Appropriations Committee. It has to be voted on in the full bill, and that's usually around Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Krigi.
A report.
Thank you. Pizza's waiting at home. Trustee Usa.
No report.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Trustee Gutierrez.
Yes, I'll be brief. You know, I just wanted to say about Veranda that I get where the staff is coming from, and I get our desire to see something better and good there, and I appreciate all their work. I'd like to see a new letter at some point that has a date of 2024 for completion of work and 2025 for the expiration of the letter, and I think that that's a good midpoint for both of us. So hopefully we can come up with that. But on other news, the Historic Committee met. I wanted you to know that part of what we do at the Historic Committee is we get a lot of residents calling, or the libraries call us, looking for information on so-and-so and so-and-so, and so we do a lot of work looking through the archives for that stuff. And I wanted you to know that back in 1958, this is really important, the price of a house around here was only $12,000, and the average wage was $4,600, and minimum wage was only $1. Rent was $92. Bacon was only 65 cents, you guys. Gas was only 25 cents. Eggs were only 32 cents. That was 1958. And on August 14, 1958, Hanover Park was established. So it's our 65th anniversary coming up. I wish we lived in those financial times, right? We did update the display with some items from the past that we've celebrated here, but it is our 65th anniversary on the 14th. So happy anniversary, y'all.
Well, thank you. I remember spending $2 to fill up a gas tank, and I thought it was a lot of money. With that, we have a motion to go to executive session for Section 2C11, litigation and probable litigation.
Second.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second.
Yep.
Roll call, please.
We will not be returning, correct?
Correct.
Great. So we'll go back up. Trustee Kunkel?
Yes.
Trustee Bancole?
Yes.
Trustee Priegi?
Yes.
Trustee Husani?
Yes.
Trustee Gutierrez? With no return.
Yeah, we did all that.
And Trustee Porter?
And not returning.
And not returning.
Yes.
Thank you.